Whereas this proclamation recognizes suicide as a community-wide problem and suicide prevention as requiring a community effort, and whereas Montana's suicide rate is the third highest in the nation and has ranked among the top 5 states with the highest rates of suicide for the past 4 decades, and whereas since 2017, Missoula County has suffered 143 suicides, and whereas suicide by firearm accounts for 50% of all suicides in the United States and 62% of all suicides in Montana, and guns stored in the home are used for suicide 40 times more than for self-defense, and whereas it is important to support our new National Suicide Prevention Lifeline call center here in Missoula, along with our new mobile response units who can effectively and empathetically intervene in crisis situations. And whereas our community will support suicide prevention efforts to the maximum extent possible with initiatives like Project Tomorrow Montana, which works to reduce Missoula County suicide deaths and attempts through educational programs and evidence-based policy. Now, therefore, in coordination with National Suicide Prevention Week, we, the Missoula Board of County Commissioners in Montana, do hereby recognize the week of September 7th through the 13th, 2022 as Suicide Prevention Week.
Thank you. Well, we just have one item here. Is there any public comment on items not on the agenda? I don't see any in the room, and I don't think we see any online. Our current claims list as of August 26th through August 30th by the Commissioner's Office totals $613,728.20. That's a lower number than it usually is.
Yeah, it is.
Belt tight.
Felt tight.
There we go.
So we have one hearing, final budget hearing and approval for fiscal year 2023. Andrew Chorney.
Excuse me. That's okay.
We forgot to get Andrew his headset. We have a special, we didn't do that.
It's in front of me, so I'm going to try to speak directly into the microphone this time. Welcome to the
Nice
2023 final budget hearing. I'm Andrew Chorney, Chief Financial Officer from Missoula County. I'm going to try and cover a few items today. The final budget presentation will consist of the budget challenges and priorities the commissioners faced, the proposed 2023 appropriations or expenses, the budgeted revenue to support those appropriations, and the tax impacts to the taxpayers. And then we want to touch a little bit on the public comment we received through the various channels that we identified in your earlier presentation. We received public comment. It was mainly focused on frustration about the property taxes increasing, not keeping pace with wage increases across sectors, which has historically been the case in the United States over many, many years. Other comments included broad requests holding increases back to expenditures and scaling back services, but the comments lack specificity in where to direct those reductions. I did have a conversation with Mr. Kenneth Cole this morning of the Tower District, and he relayed to me his concerns, and it was more in the light of fixed income and increasing taxes. He and his wife are both on Social Security, and they bought a home a number of years in the Tower District, and it's gone up exponentially since the 2-year reappraisal.
Gentlemen,
I'm sorry. I spoke to a man by the name of Kenneth Cole this morning who relayed to me that he and his wife had bought a home over in the Tower District, I believe in 2014. And they're both on Social Security fixed incomes, and the taxes continue to increase, and they're having trouble affording their homes. And so we talked about a number of options, and he asked me to include him in any potential legislative testimony. He'd be happy to come up and lay out all his books and show what it's doing to him and his family. So it was an interesting conversation, productive conversation, I thought. In terms of assessed value, this kind of speaks to the 2-year reappraisal cycle. You can see that right now, we started in 2016 with an assessed value, and this is an assessed value of the entire county. This is the value that the Department of Revenue places on the county every other year. And in 2016, it was 12 billion. It's jumped to 18 billion in 2023. So you'll notice that it went up 18.74 billion. And you notice that the little spikes there, the off years, the non-appraisal years are the ones that really level off, and then the reappraisal years just jump tremendously because the value of your homes increased. The important part of the tax system is the newly taxable property. That's the property that's built or is substantially improved so that it can add value to the tax roll and spread out those taxes among a bigger tax base because there's new houses or new developments or what have you. So that's the number we're very interested in each year. This year it went up a little bit, 7.349 million, a little more than last year, but about a million of it was gobbled up by increases in the URDs and TIFs as well.
And URD and TIF stands for?
Urban Renewal District.
Tax
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 increment
increment
finance.
finance.
And those are in the city.
Yep. And this last one here, and the development enhancement change the total property for all new continues to increase for taxable values. And
Andrew, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
The total taxable value for all of Missoula County increased $292,000 for the fiscal year. It's because it's divided in so many different taxable classes. The assessed valuation is derived for residential classes at 1.35% of that assessed value. So the taxable value is brought down by the different asset classes.
So Andrew, what's the difference then between taxable value and assessed value?
The assessed value is the overall, the closest thing I can compare it to, and it really isn't market value, but it's what the Department of Revenue assesses as the total value of the county. The taxable value is what they assess each tax class percentage of that assessed valuation. So that taxable value for that tax class is derived from that assessed valuation.
And it's a percentage for residential, a percentage for commercial,
Right.
percentage for agriculture.
There are, I'm guessing 200 different tax classes.
Wow.
Set by the legislature and
Yes, yes. Annual.
Department of Revenue. Okay.
Right.
Wait, okay, so this last bullet, total taxable value for all property for Missoula County for fiscal year 2021, 292.5 million. But then your question.
So, and if I understand it right, assessed value is what the Department of Revenue says the value is of all those properties, but all those properties are taxed at different percentages if they're residential, commercial, agriculture, or apparently 197 other categories. If you're to take those all of those percentages divided into that total value, this is what we get up. That's the taxable value. So if there's $1 billion worth of residential value and it's at 1%, then there'd be $1 million worth of taxable value.
And your assessed value, that's not the same as if you were going to put your
Right.
home on the market.
Yeah.
What you would likely get at some point in time is looking at my assessed value for my home, I'm guessing I could probably sell my property for more than what the state
sure.
has identified as the assessed value.
And if,
Right.
if I understand it right, it's because when the state did that assessment, they didn't send an appraiser over to Dave's house and stand there and look at it and go inside and check it all out. They just
No.
looked at, on paper, we got this much square footage, a finished basement or not, and a garage or not, and then an algorithm spit out what the price is. It didn't do what an appraiser would do, which would go look at the place and do a bunch of comps.
Exactly.
So the market value is always going to be higher than the assessed value.
Every 2 years, they go out and assess like properties, and they take big swaths of property and similarly increase the percentages. Which, brings me on my next point, which I keep hammering on, but maybe someday somebody will listen. Property tax is broken. It's an archaic and it's a punitive method of taxation. A person's wealth isn't measured by the size of his home or his property. It may make sense in Old England when the royals derived their income from their lands. Today, a person's wealth or ability to pay is not determined by the size of the value of the home they own or they rent. Reform needs to be, we need Montana to step up and do some real tax reform based on a person's ability to pay and not how much inflation or other factors have driven up the price of their homes. The system is funding services. The system for funding services at the local levels is broken. We need property tax reform. Property taxes cannot be the only source of income local governments rely on to provide essential services to residents they serve. Montana needs a tax system that will tax visitors who come to enjoy Montana while providing tax relief to those who have paid and continue to pay for county services and infrastructure that we use. And just for my last point, I have a little example of that. This is from the Institute of Tourism and Recreation Research of the University of Montana. County services and infrastructure seeing increased demands on them put year by year by non-residents. Just about 30% of the over 12 million people that visited Montana in 2021 came to Missoula County. They spent an average of 6.5 nights here. 55% were here for recreation and vacation. The routes varied. These were the primary routes that we thought we would list because they're kind of direct into Missoula and affect our roads. And what was interesting that 65% of them made over $75,000 a year and 12% over $2,000. There were two layers between those that were, these are wealthy folks coming in that can afford to help pay for these services. And a resort tax that would provide some property tax relief for residents, I think would make a lot of sense. Oh, there. Okay. So getting into the budget presentation, priorities and challenges that the commission faced this year. Number one, we heard from department, we had heads, we heard from chief officers, we heard from managers. They just could not keep or retain county employees. We had folks being hired off the lines in the treasurer's office this year for higher wages, and we're just having a very, very difficult time retaining and recruiting employees. So to do that, over 85% of the employees here are governed by a collective bargaining unit or a union that takes care of their salaries and their negotiations. We have a small percentage of the staff here which is not represented by a union. They're called the personal plan individuals. We implemented a plan this year that would bring in market wages as they gain experience in a shorter period of time than has been done before. We got the market wages from a national survey and a local survey. It's the same system the the Missoula is using with slight changes, but we believe will help retain and recruit some employees that we've lost. We have made increases at the lower end of the pay scale to ensure all regular employees make at least $15 an hour, which seems awfully low now. We did have a 5% increase in medical and insurance premiums this year for all 855 FTEs. And the big one was in fiscal year 23, we had a 27th pay period because 2 weeks doesn't divide into a year equally. So you have this incremental piece at the end of each year that in the 13th year provides you with that 27th pay period.
And do we know what the figure is for, or is there Chris or Ann? Do we know what that number was, what this 27th pay period is costing us?
I meant to look that up too.
Sorry, I
I'm
mean,
so sorry.
it's okay, don't worry about it.
And if I understand it right, going forward, we're just going to put a little money away every year. So 13 years from now, it won't be as big a hit, but
That's exactly right.
none of us were in our positions 13 years ago to ask that this had been done.
We have devised a fund and we're putting money from each and every department into that fund in 8-hour increments each year for each month to accommodate those 13 pay periods. Another one of the obstacles or the challenges you really faced this year was inflation, and it's just like everybody else. I'm not telling anybody anything new, but it did hit the county, hard, and as it did with the residents. Oh, here we go. The Mountain West, unfortunately, through year over year up until last month, we leaded the entire nation in the consumer price index at 9.6%. Cost of gasoline up 37%. County costs were up 726%, or up to $726,000. Natural gas 47%, electricity 4.3 in 21, projected 3.9 22. County combined energy costs were up $123,000 or 6%. Cost of all construction materials increased at least 21%. Asphalt, which we felt spiked 20% and increased across the roads fairly substantially. Then we looked at the capital projects that we had proposed for the year, and we took a look at just the ones that we thought were necessary. We really had to go forward with these. The radio replacement project with the Sheriff's Department, all the frequencies are going to new bands that provide better reception. And for the handheld units, I believe it was $1 million. For the cars, it was $500,000. So this is first of 3 payments there that we managed to have some cash savings for the first payment. Elections office renovation, we're finishing up that. We issued some debt for that. The detention center items are all repair and replacement of existing items, with the exception of the safety railing and the maximum security facility. We've had some suicide attempts, and the railing prevents that from happening. Door key and access, we've got an antiquated access system here that is only supported by one vendor in the entire United States, and it's failing. Financial software for $100,000. I guarantee you will triple that investment back in the next year. Open space county, those are that's debt we've already issued, and we're going to go ahead and spend those monies on open trails and trails, open land and trails for the residents here in the county. Range improvements for the sheriff. They've got a pretty sad looking range out there, and they need somewhere to practice. Court trials exchanger, that we have one that's very bad and one that's failing. If it goes down, one side of the air conditioning in the courthouse goes down, so it's not a good thing. LED replacements of the lights, that's a 3.5 year payback. That was a no-brainer. Rocky Mountain Garden Exploration Centers, they've raised nearly $6 million for this project. $14 million will be issued in debt. Parking lot expansion at the detention center and TSOS, $530,000. That was something we need to go forward with. And the Y infrastructure survey, which is being funded by the Y increment that's being collected out there from the businesses within the district, and some cash savings from our land sales account will fund that survey that will help us project and develop a plan for putting in infrastructure and improving the Y area.
Andrew, I just wanted to point some out just for Brett. When this is cash savings, that means not new taxes right now. That's money from a long time ago that got saved up and these all relate, you could trace them all back to a specific department. So those departments have saved money over the years by being thrifty, and they're using that savings to fund these projects. These projects, though they have big dollar amounts next to them, aren't coming from new taxes. Thank you.
Andrew, so as far as the range improvements for the sheriff's office, it seems like a while back that it was uncertain the cash status of whether we'd be able to fund that. I'm assuming at some point, maybe I missed a meeting where this was discussed, but the cash situation of the sheriff's department must have looked better than we had thought at one point.
This had originally been allocated for the gardens at the detention center, and then it was reallocated to the
Okay.
So this piece you're certain of,
Yeah.
as opposed to the estimation on the entirety of cash at the sheriff's
That
office.
is correct.
Okay. At some point, I'd like to maybe talk about the gardens thing. I'd forgotten that
That got nixed.
2019,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, and then because of changes at the jail, it can't happen. It was oriented entirely around mask,
Ah,
Okay.
which is going away. So
Okay. Very good.
MASC stands for
I know what it is.
Sanction Corrections,
Look at you.
but no, I don't know.
I don't know what the M stands for. Montana.
So it's the
Missoula.
Missoula Assessment and Sanction Center.
Thanks for saving us, Chris.
Go. Yeah.
No worries.
Maybe it had been determined that they could not do gardening without the use of sharp implements.
Yes.
So, okay. Thanks for that clarification, Andrew.
Yeah. And talking about proposed 23 creations. Yes. The computer. This shows a transfer out 15.5% or 15.5 million versus 13.6 million. That's,
Yeah.
that's primarily internal with some external transfer. It doesn't really affect, it does not affect property taxes whatsoever. The debt service went from 10.2 or from 8.1, 10.2 with the addition of the Rocky Mountain Gardens Exploration Center and the Election Center and the parking lot out at the detention center.
Andrew, could you go back just a second to just for everyone's edification here in the room or online? What again do the transfers out constitute?
It's essentially a transfer in and out of county funds, and it doesn't really, they should actually equal, but we have a tiny portion of transfers that go out to, say, like the museum. That's a transfer out. Yeah. So that it's almost entirely, it should equal each other, but we have a couple that we're trying to transfer into expenditures rather than transfers out. It's an accounting mess.
Okay,
If that makes any sense at all. I'm sure it doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry.
thanks.
And then capital, we went over the capital, the operations. That was basically all the inflationary factors and all the other options that we had going on. A lot of the operational costs are also PHC related. So they're
But can you explain a little bit more about what that?
sure
Oh,
that
now it's back.
that was the,
Can you
that was the Rocky Mountains Exploration Center and the Election Center, primarily 14
And as you showed on one of these slides on all that we listed all these capital projects, most all of them were paid for with cash, some debt service, but most all with cash and some ARPA. So that increase doesn't equal the same amount of increase in property tax liability.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Josh. So the operations well, it was primarily the inflationary increases and some other increases. And then personnel, of course, the recruitment and retention issues. It's a 9% increase in personnel expenditures, 20% increase in operation expenditures, and then because of big capital projects, we also had 220% increase in budgeted capital expenditures. 211 million in total expenditures. And then we'll talk about revenues. Revenues that they actually look like, it looks like about 12.12% increase, which is different than 10.6 that I mentioned earlier that we're actually increasing. And that has to do with gosh, what was it? Trying to think now. I don't remember in a minute. I'll come back to it. Excuse me. And then entitlement share went up 3%, plus we had a slight offset for HB 103 that reduced the personal business property tax, well, increased the exemption from $100,000 to $300,000. So we did not receive that portion of the property tax, but because it is one of the tax classes, they didn't want to upset the equalization of the taxes. So they reimbursed us through the entitlement share for 2023. That holds true for 2024, or we just lose that piece of tax is yet to be seen. Transfers in, that a lot of that has to do with the grant monies and some other things that come in. Debt proceeds, we'll be issuing the debt for those projects this year. And the other revenue, we'll kind of split that up this year for you, so you can take a look at the assessments, licenses and permits, intergovernmental revenues, charges for services. That's everything from the sheriff's department to library to building, fines and forfeitures.
I just want to point something out about how entrepreneurial we're being if charges for services, fee for services, which is an entrepreneurial activity, is almost equivalent to property taxes.
It is, yeah, we do get quite a bit of money up from the charges for services.
Yeah, $62 million. That's,
Yeah,
that's
30% of our budget, or to 32% for property taxes. That's pretty good.
So Andrew, these charges for services are not to be confused with charges for services that would be coming back to us by way of entitlement shares.
No. These are actual charges for service fees and services that we charge.
I mean, do we have an example of
but-
like our
but-
top 5?
Good. I was thinking like building permits, where that division is funded by the service, by the fees it generates. But I'm just guessing there.
Yeah, that's way more than I think a lot of folks realize.
Yeah,
I
it's
was wondering if
huge.
Amanda, or is
equivalent
there
to
someone who
property
has
taxes.
it like on the tip of their?
So one of our largest is when we take in prisoners from other counties or jurisdictions at the detention center for 6.1 million. Another large area is the fair brings in income. It is projected to bring in almost $791,000. The health department, when it gives someone a vaccine or visits with them, will bring in $866,000. The biggest lion in that bunch is Partnership Health Center, and the services its
go.
pharmacy
There we
provide is over $33 million.
There you go. Yeah. As it is with PHC with so many things, a huge chunk of money, but none of it is tax money. It's PHC is its own animal funded by fee for services.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you,
That's
Amanda,
super
for
helpful.
having that so clear.
Man, do you recall what the other two property taxes were that increased that to the number it is?
There was the aging services voted bill and the judgment levy.
Thank you. Okay, so that if we take those out, that drops it back down to 10.6% that we've been talking about,
Okay, thank you.
or 10.37. I see Amanda's been fine tuning her numbers again. So total revenue increased by 22.81%. Any questions on any of those categories?
Well, maybe just to hit home again for Brett too. Yeah, what do you want to make sure folks know?
Good question.
Gosh,
That you don't want her to miss?
So, yeah, can I throw a couple?
please,
It'd be
please.
great, Brett, to note that 30% of this revenue is coming from fee for service, not from property taxes, and that entrepreneurial activity is roughly equivalent to property taxes. Also, really great to know, and these are repeats, but I'm just kind of putting exclamation marks on them, that most all of those capital projects are coming from savings from specific departments, not new property taxes as well. And that we have prioritized, and you could see this in personnel, retention and recruitment. Essentially, the county is people doing stuff. People doing stuff, that's people providing services for the residents of our county. And it's essential for the quality of those services that we have really good folks in place to deliver those services. Everything from immunizations at the health department to making sure your roads are plowed. And because of inflation and because of the crazy changes in the job market over the past couple of years, we have to keep up to some degree. We don't match market, but we come close. If we don't do that, we don't have any staff. And we're facing the same challenges in the market as everybody else. So this year we prioritized making sure the folks who work for us stay working for us, as opposed to buying a bunch of new gear, whether that's for public works or in IT.
And maybe going back to just something that we hit on earlier that I think significant enough to take note of is this $62 million charges for services. This is a huge amount of our well, 30% of our total revenue. So if folks on first blush might look at this $211 million total revenue figure and say, oh my gosh, there's just bags of cash laying around in the courthouse that could be utilized for various services. Well, the reality is that a good chunk of this is kind of value neutral as it relates to property taxes when we're talking about Partnership Health Center as a major component of that, several to the tune of several tens of millions of dollars. So that's part of the backstory that I think many folks, maybe most folks in Missoula County, are not aware of.
Thank you.
Mostly tax impacts. $100,000 assessed value. Countywide taxes. The annual increase would be $22.72 or $1.82 a month. County only levies $25.07 annual increase or $2.09 per month.
You may need to swallow that microphone.
I'm sorry.
I need a miracle ear. I don't know.
Okay. The countywide levies, the annual increase will go up $22.72. The monthly increase is $1.89. County only levies $25.07 annually, $2.09 monthly. And if we were going to equate this to the approximate $500 value of an average home in Missoula, the annual increase would be $125 countywide. In the county only, $113,000 or $113, $113,000. Oh my God. $10.45 for county-wide levies monthly and $9.47 for county-only levies wide monthly.
So if I could just throw something out here, looking at these numbers, we are all paying at least $10 more for groceries, for gas every month than we were last year. And our increase in costs reflect that same thing. We are in the same market, whether we're hiring employees or buying tires for the sheriff's trucks. And essentially, that's what this is. We are buying stuff in the same market that everybody else is buying things in. And if you look at it by the month, as most home economies live, I don't feel good about it because nobody wants to pay any more money for anything. But I feel good that these numbers are as low as they are because they reflect what we are all facing.
That concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Andrew. And please, sir, please ask away. We'd love, given the mad crowd here, you can have lots of dialogue.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, I had all
And-
my
oh,
notes.
I'm sorry, help me with your name again.
My name's Greg Souza. I'm a county resident. I had all my notes and I walked out the door without the ones that I prepared. The thing of it is these wages and retention, I don't understand the retention part of it. I got online and I pulled up everybody's salary, and everybody's salary that works for the county is above uh, the people that live in Missoula and work in the private sector. So, well, I don't know what this retention is that we're talking about for the new budget. You know, you've got jailers at the detention center. They come and go because it's probably a rotten job. And you've got people in the county attorney's office that can probably make more money in the private sector. I get those two jobs, but for retention in wages, the wages are already acceptable from what I can tell on the, looking at the internet.
Mr. Souza, I would love to, if you're okay. Can I?
Please,
Yeah, I
please.
totally don't want to interrupt you, and I
No,
appreciate you
you're
coming
fine.
back after last time too. Thanks for taking the time to come. As you can see, not very many people comment, and we all wish more people did. So when we're saying retention and keeping our wage scale where it ought to be, we didn't make those numbers up. We didn't do it by anecdote. We did real work, and Chris is still on the line. I hate to put you on the spot, Chris, but I know that you have this on the tip of your tongue too. We engaged folks doing real research on wage scales. And then we committed to being a little bit less than market and getting to market rate over time. So if a person starts with us, they're going to start at below market, then over time get to market rate. We intentionally are a little bit less. And though some of those numbers may seem high, I would say if you had a look at this research, and Chris could send it to you if you like, you can see. And I get anecdotally, it'd be like, what the heck, we're paying somebody $19 an hour. I used to do that job for less. And I understand that people will have feelings that way. We did real research. We engaged real researchers to do this, and that's how we came up with this scale. And Chris, are you okay speaking to that?
Sure, commissioners, I'm happy to. So yes, we engaged a firm to specifically look at salaries, not only of our direct competitors in the public sector around the state, but also our direct competitors in the private market. And so when we look to compare our entry level jobs, it's not exactly a one-to-one comparison, because you're right. You know, Missoula County is, for example, the only place that has a treasurer's clerk. But when you look at those as entry level positions, and you look at positions that have the same equivalent educational and work experience, and then we see places like Shields hiring at $21 an hour, fast food restaurants starting at $17 or $18 an hour, starting at $14 an hour, which is where we were, doesn't allow us to compete and actually get applicants in through the doors. So what has happened is Missoula County in the past has had, 3 or 4 applicants for each position. But what we're seeing now is we have recruitments that fail pretty continuously, where we get 0 applicants. And so we're having to make changes to address that, because we can't fill positions that have been open sometimes, in cases for more than a year.
I realize that what you're saying, you've contracted out to some agency to check the prices. All I can tell you is from my experience living here in Missoula, I worked for a large utility company here in Missoula. I was there for 40 years before I retired. 40. I know what decent wages are because I had a livable wage job that was bargained for here in Missoula. And when I go online and pull up the salaries of some employees that work for the county, I was almost floored. Now, maybe you can correct me, but when I pulled up the salaries for the county commissioners, you 3, is it true that you make between $90,000 and $100,000 a year?
Yes.
And Andrew, you make $127,000 a year? It's pretty good wages for Missoula, Montana, for us to pay. Like I said, I worked for a big utility here for 40 years, and I nowhere near came up to that. And this was a job that I went through an 8-year apprentice program to get to top craft pay. And so the people that are making decent money in this town, this increase in the property tax it's not gonna phase them one iota. It's the lower people that make maybe 50 grand a year or less that have to come up with this amount of increase. So, it just blew me away. Now, I could not find the salaries of county employees on the Missoula County website. Is there some place that I can find that information on the Missoula County website?
Can,
It's public record, so they should
hang
have
on
it.
just a moment. Allison, do you have some insight on that?
Oh, is that what you have to do?
But that isn't an onerous thing on our website. There's basically a button. Can you describe how that could be done?
I found an online portal, but it was not connected in any way with Missoula County. Maybe I was on the wrong one, but, I didn't know how accurate those numbers were because it was not coming from Missoula County. It was somewhere else, but they're saying those figures are
If
fairly accurate.
Allison's right now making sure you have the info so you can get to making a public records request.
And so there are a few things at play. There's our pay plan for non-union county employees. So that's one thing that lays out kind of the matrix by which folks who are non-union employees will be paid. Then there are the collective bargaining agreements we've got any number of unions that we collectively bargain with for salary. So there is that, and there's a process by which we execute those contracts. And then there are the individual employees. It's like, yeah, you can have the pay matrix before you, but it's like who specifically is attached with each of those positions is a separate question. So anyway, I think Allison can get you some additional information on how to drill down into our pay plan.
I'm just going to stand by I don't believe our wages are inflated. I believe they are market rate, if not less, with all the positions, even the positions that are paid well. If you were to look at the private sector at similar budget sizes, similar sets of responsibilities, you're going to see that those folks are actually making a little bit less than the private sector. That's not me saying those aren't high wages. They are high wages. But if you looked at a CFO of an organization that had a $200 million budget, that woman or man would be making more than Andrew does. That's just the reality of it, even though it's a high wage. For sure, it's a high wage. We're also talking about less than 10 employees out of about 855. And where we put our emphasis in lifting wages was on the bottom, not on the top.
Anyway, you cut it, it's pretty good wages. I can see why you'd want to be reelected for another term. Making 90 grand or 100 grand in Missoula is pretty good wages, no matter what you do. Like I said, it is what it is. And I'm sorry that I left my notes back at home because I had prepared some questions here and
You're still welcome to ask them, man. We're not going anywhere. You could come back next Thursday and
and
ask
you
the
can-
same questions. You're very welcome to.
Are you going to approve the budget today?
Yes.
Okay, well,
We could still have dialogue and go back and forth. If there are questions, I imagine you want an answer, and we could provide you with those answers.
okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
I heard that. I'm sorry. I hope you're feeling better.
I'm feeling fine. It's just this spasm. Thank you. And it's not COVID.
Do we have anybody out there with a raised hand?
No public.
Brett, do you have any questions? Slavin, you're here. Do you have any questions? Or are you just checking it out? That is very kind of you.
And embarrassed. We're forgetting your name. I'm forgetting your name in the back. Randy,
Do you have any questions?
come on.
Come on up, man. And before you say anything, Randy, we would just like to say thank you for being here. We really appreciate the service you provide all the folks who work in the
Glad
courthouse.
to do it. So to start with, my name is Randy Richter. What I'm saying here is not anything to do with the company that I work for at Courthouse Security. One of the conversations that I had first thing this morning was discussing the upcoming weather changes and snow removal and such. And it was brought to my attention that they have 1 of 6 positions for groundskeeping filled. So my background is AutoZone retail. When I left, we were at 38% of staffing where it was supposed to be. Where AutoZone struggles with the same thing that everybody else in town is. But as far as those things go, that issue is definitely a real one.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the big things with being competitive pay wise, it's not always pay. You know, many people that come and go with different employers, it's pay, it's treatment, it's job satisfaction. And the reality is that anybody who has a steady job that is a reliable employee has a ton of options.
Yeah.
And that's something that, you know, the DMV has gone through some major changes. And working at the security desk, we get a lot of feedback. And lately that feedback has been, wow, I'm amazed they got me in and out within an hour.
Wow.
So
great to hear.
Good to hear.
it's good to see that on a regular basis. And obviously it's a workforce issue that goes far beyond county, but it is something to definitely keep in mind, is that even as we fill positions, the workload is not decreasing ever.
Yeah.
The issue with people coming in from out of town, there are consistently transients moving through the property that I try to learn the population, talk to them, get to know where they're from. And a large percentage of them are not from Missoula, and they're coming to Missoula because they know that we have the services. So keeping those services going is definitely a real issue.
Do you see turnover in that population?
There's a lot of turnover in the
So
population.
people are here and they disappear and new people come.
People here and they disappear. Just this morning, one of our gentlemen that was consuming some drinks on the lawn, he's like, man, I went to Great Falls. Great Falls didn't work out, so here I am.
Yeah.
And so it's something that I think the challenges are not going to go away for sure.
Yep.
But that struggle to keep employment and keep people here, it's a real one. And you know, you have people with, I think there was a gal, I think it was 2 weeks ago was her last day, 43 years with the county. And
Mhm.
it's getting to the point where you see 5 or 10 years, and that's impressive. So I think we definitely need to keep that focus going.
Thank you for all that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, those are excellent points, because there's real value in having folks who stick around for a while. And there are some specific job classifications that, as we've heard earlier, are just difficult to fill those positions and retain those employees. One that we haven't mentioned is in IT, where
Goodness.
there is just no way we can compete adequately with the private sector. So it's a matter of how can we think creatively to incentivize folks to want to work for Missoula County when there's just no way that just on wages alone that we can match 1-for-1 what the private sector is offering.
And same with attorney's office.
Yeah, I would have never thought at one point in time, I would have never thought that the state of Montana, being the institution of largesse that it is, would be stealing away folks from the county attorney's office or maybe others. But that day is no more, and it is the case that the state of Montana and the Attorney General's office and others might be offering what we cannot offer.
John only stays with us for the snacks.
Bozeman is offering.
I'm not going anywhere, Commissioner.
Thank you. We actually appreciate that.
But I'm in a unique position. I worked in the private sector for over 20 years before I came to public service. And so, you know, I bought a house in Missoula when they were
Yeah.
much more affordable than they are now. I was able to get ahead a little bit with my family and my retirement finances and things like that. So I'm not a very good example to use. And I can tell you that the younger attorneys in our office, the younger staff people in our office we're really having trouble retaining them and then bringing them in. It's because the private sector is just far more attractive.
Brett, I wanted to throw one thing out, piggybacking off what Mr. Richter said, and I really appreciate your comments on our transient population and it's transient. That means come and go, and that some people may come for services and then they disappear, like the gentleman who was here from Great Falls and then went somewhere else. So I just want to push back a bit. If people were flocking here for services, they would come and stay. But instead, we see turnover, and transient is the right word, and that means continually moving. There was a point-in-time survey not too long ago where it was something like 65% of the folks who were unhoused actually were from Western Montana.
I was just going to say, then looking at Bozeman's salaries, they are significantly higher than Missoula's salaries. We're not just low compared to the private sector, but to the public sector as well. And Michelle, my financial services director, was offered $40,000 more plus a $10,000 signing bonus to
It's
go.
the signing bonus. I guess all this conversation, it boils down to one little nugget here, and that we at Missoula County are not immune to any of the pressures of the modern world. We are in the same boat as residents, as commercial folks, as entrepreneurs, as people who are artists, all of it. We are all in the same boat around inflation, around a tight job market, around a red hot real estate market, rising interest rates, et cetera. We're in the midst of all of that. Please.
I just wanted to say, we all agree that the tax system here in the state is broken. Everybody agrees to that. How often do you talk to the legislators about trying to get some kind of sales tax, whatever, to help the property owners? It's like when my property gets appraised, every year it goes up and up and up. But the thing of it is, it's like, it's not for sale. You can tell me it's worth anything, but until the day I sell it, it's not worth that value, but I have to pay tax on it. And, I've called the legislators, the two for this area, and I have gotten no calls back, nothing. As far as I can tell, they're not going to help us one iota, because if they try to implement a sales tax or whatever, they're fearing for their job. Maybe they won't get reelected. And so every session, they don't want to tackle the problem. And they put the ball in your court to give us the bad news about these increases in our property tax. So do you talk to the legislators?
You are
very much,
preaching
or-
to the choir,
Oh
Mr.
my
Souza.
God, you are exactly preaching to the choir, and there is not a week that goes by that we don't bang our heads around and struggle with how to deal with this. And we are, even as we speak, actively working on creative solutions that may be palatable to a legislature for whom tax is a four-letter word. We are on it. That doesn't mean we're going to be successful, but rest assured, we are super aware of this problem. We all face this problem as individuals and are trying our absolute darndest to come up with a solution.
And the irony has not escaped us that the state of Montana is awash in $2 billion in a budget surplus, but that comes from income tax, not property tax. And you are exactly right in terms of your assessment of it doesn't, there's no correlation, no direct correlation between what your property is valued at and your ability to pay. None. I mean,
And Andrew pointed that out too, that this is an archaic, 17th century system.
It'll be discussed during this legislative session, and
We are working on it. We're in the we are in the minority. The large counties on the western side of the state that are economically prosperous are in the minority, and our problems are not shared by most all the counties in the state. So it's an uphill battle. But I think property taxes are going to have a moment. The fact that CI 121 came and died means I think there's a little bit of space for conversation around reform that didn't exist even 2 years ago.
Okay, I was just wanting to see what your thought on that was, if they're doing anything at all, or are they just turning a blind eye to when you try to bring up getting some kind of sales tax, whatever, some kind of relief for us, so.
Well, I would encourage you to continue what you've been doing already, and would encourage folks out there who are listening, should any of this get reported in the media, that they absolutely should continue to reach out to their state legislators, because we'll continue to do what we can to reach out to those legislators, but we can't be the only squeaky wheel on this.
Thanks for
Thank you, though.
attending to local affairs.
Well,
I guess I would just say in general about this fiscal year's budget, I think this is a prudent budget. We prioritize personnel, we're maintaining services. We have some very targeted investments. We've turned back a couple $1 million or so worth of budget requests.
2.6.
2.6 to be exact. And these were not just extraneous requests. Every one of these requests had absolute merit, either to address a backlog of deferred maintenance, to address some community need. They were thoughtfully prepared, and it pained me to say no, but we just simply could not afford those additional expenditures and appropriations this fiscal year. But I think this is a solid piece of work.
Well done, Andrew and Amanda and Melissa and Michelle and team. We appreciate all your work.
And we're working very hard to find additional revenues for the county, and specifically with the investment portfolio and program I have going this year. I think we'll see some good revenue coming in,
Great.
Perhaps as high as $2 million.
Great. Good
Wait,
job.
I'm sorry, say that number again.
2 million.
Dave, is that a motion?
Yeah, I would.
Adopt the resolution.
I would move that we adopt the resolution adopting the fiscal year 2023 budget.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks.
We do a little comment here. I just want to say thanks to everybody, to Mr. Richter, to Brett, to Slavin, to Mr. Souza, everybody who we just had a robust discussion about these things, and appreciate everyone's involvement. Thank you.
Yeah, this all involves stewardship of public funds, and we do not take this lightly. And we see our role as a steward and are looking for ways to do business better.
Thank you. Or Allison, did we miss anything? Okay. Brett, how do you feel? Thanks,
And-
everyone. Have a great afternoon. Oh,
Brett and
I'm
Andrew.
not cutting slot.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, Andrew and all of us are available for questions after standing around if you like. It's okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.